All right, so get ready because today we are taking a deep dive into mechanoreceptors and specialized senses.
Ooh, sounds intense.
It is, but also pretty amazing. It's day 70, season 5, and I guess our mission today is to really unpack how we as humans sense touch, hear all the sounds around us, and of course, how we manage to stay balanced.
Lots to cover.
Yeah, lots to cover. Luckily, I did some digging and I found some pretty interesting stuff. There's this YouTube channel that does a deep dive into cellular biology that was really helpful.
Okay, yeah, I know that one. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it is. And then I was also looking at this chapter from a molecular biology book about thyroid hormone receptors, which, believe it or not, actually had some relevant stuff in it.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought of looking there.
Right. It was kind of a surprise. Anyway, are you ready to, really get into this?
Definitely. Let's unpack it.
All right. So, first of all, what are these things called hair cells? They seem to be pretty important.
Yeah, they are. They're basically like these tiny little sensors,
Yeah.
and they live in your inner ear. Yeah.
And their job is to basically constantly monitor what's going on around you. You
Yeah.
know, like the sounds and also your body's position and all that.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, are they literally like little hairs in there?
Well, they have these projections called stereocilia.
Yeah.
And yeah, they kind of look like hairs, I guess. The point is they're super sensitive.
Okay, so I can kind of picture that.
Like imagine like a field of wheat, right?
Yeah.
Swaying in the wind. That's kind of how these hair cells work. Even the tiniest movement will set them off.
So they're reacting to sounds, but also like our movements.
Exactly. Both.
Yeah.
It's how we hear and also how we keep our balance.
Okay, that makes sense. But I mean, how does that actually work?
Yeah.
I get that these hair cells are moving around, but how does that become the sound that I hear or the feeling of being balanced?
Well, okay, so that's where we got to talk about these things called mechanosensitive ion channels.
Uh-oh. Big words. Yeah, sorry, it's a mouthful. But they're really important. So basically picture this. You've got your hair cell, right? And it's got its little stereocilia waving around.
Got it.
All right, now these ion channels, they're embedded in the hair cell's membrane, and they're directly connected to those little stereocilia. So when a sound wave comes along, or you tilt your head, those stereocilia bend, and that bending causes the ion channels to open up.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like a little gate that opens and closes.
Okay, so they're triggered by the movement of the stereocilia.
Exactly. And when those gates open, it lets these ions flow into the cell, and that creates an electrical signal.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. Like, you've got this physical force, could be a sound wave, or, you just moving your head and your body turns it into, an electrical message. And that message travels all the way to your brain.
That is pretty wild. So it's
Yeah.
like movement, ion channels, electrical signal, and boom, our brain is like, hey, I hear a sound, or whoa, I'm tilting.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah,
much.
That's incredible. But okay, I have another question. How do those ion channels, know when to open and close? What's telling them what to do?
It all comes down to their gating mechanism. These channels are basically designed to be super sensitive to pressure, like mechanical pressure.
So when a stereocilium bends, it creates pressure.
Exactly. And that pressure, it literally pulls the ion channel open.
Wow. So it's like the pressure is the key and the ion channel is the lock.
Exactly. It's got to be the right kind of pressure in the right spot, and then boom, the gate opens.
That's amazing. And where are these hair cells located? Does it matter?
Oh yeah, location is everything. Like for hearing, the key player is this thing called the cochlea. It's this spiral-shaped structure in your inner ear, and it's filled with fluid.
Oh, I've heard of that. The cochlea.
Yeah, so the sound waves, they travel through your ear canal and they hit your eardrum, right? And that sets off this whole chain reaction, and eventually those vibrations reach the cochlea.
So it's like the cochlea is where the sound is actually processed or translated.
Yeah, you could say that. But here's the really cool part. See, the cochlea, it's spiral-shaped, right? And the membrane inside it, the basilar membrane, it has different levels of stiffness.
Okay.
So what happens is different frequencies of sound, they vibrate different parts of that membrane. Like high-pitched sounds will vibrate one area and low-pitched sounds will vibrate another area.
Hey, so you're saying the cochlea is kind of like a piano keyboard.
Yeah.
Where different frequencies are mapped to different locations.
Exactly. It's called tonotopic organization. It's how we can tell the difference between a high note and a low note, or a man's voice and a woman's voice.
No way. That's so cool. It's like our cochlea is breaking down the sound into all its individual frequencies, and then our brain puts it all back together so we can hear it.
Exactly. It's pretty incredible when you think about it.
That's amazing. But okay, what about balance? How does that fit in with all this?
Well, balance is all about these things called semicircular canals.
Semicircular canals.
Yeah, they're another set of like fluid-filled tubes in your inner ear, and they're arranged in these three different planes so they can detect head rotation in any direction.
Oh, wow. So they're like our built-in gyroscope.
Exactly. When you move your head, the fluid in those canals sloshes around and that bends the hair cells inside.
Yeah.
And then those hair cells, they send signals to your brain, telling it which way your head is moving and how fast.
So it's like our brain is getting all this info from the cochlea about sound and from the semicircular canals about balance, and that's how we know where we are in the world.
Exactly. And it's all happening constantly without us even having to think about it.
That is seriously mind-blowing. It makes you realize just how much is going on in our bodies all the time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And we haven't even talked about touch yet.
Oh, right. Touch. So hair cells are clearly important for hearing and balance, but I'm guessing touch is a whole other ballgame.
It is. We have a whole different set of mechanoreceptors in our skin that are responsible for our sense of touch.
So, like, are there different types of receptors for different types of touch?
You bet. We have receptors for light touch, deep pressure, vibration, even texture. It's how we can tell the difference between, like, a smooth piece of glass and a rough piece of sandpaper.
Wow, I never even thought about that. It's amazing how much is involved in just feeling something.
It really is. And each of those different types of receptors, they have their own special structure and location in the skin, so they're perfectly tuned to detect certain types of touch.
This is so fascinating. Okay, so we've got hair cells in our ears for hearing and balance, and then all these touch receptors in our skin. It's like our bodies are covered in these tiny little sensors, constantly monitoring what's going on around us.
I like that. Covered in sensors. That's a good way to put it.
So I have to ask, what happens if those sensors, like, don't work properly? Something goes wrong with these mechanoreceptors.
That's a great question, and actually, that's something we should definitely talk more about.
Yeah, definitely. It makes you wonder, what are the consequences of things going wrong in these systems?
Absolutely. It can have a huge impact.
Okay, well, I guess that's a good place to take a break.
Yeah. Good idea. Let's come back to that.
Okay, sounds good.
It really can. Like, if the hair cells in your inner ear get damaged, it can lead to hearing loss
Yeah, that makes sense.
or even balance problems, like vertigo and stuff.
Oh, yeah. That's no fun.
And then with the touch receptors, if those aren't working right, you might have trouble feeling textures or temperature or even pain.
Oh, wow. That's kind of scary.
Yeah. I mean, imagine not being able to feel if something is hot or sharp. That could be really dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. It makes you realize just how important all these senses are.
Yeah.
Like, we take them for granted, but they're actually crucial for how we interact with the world.
Exactly. And we haven't even talked about, like, all the other systems in the body that mechanoreceptors are involved in. Like, did you know they play a role in regulating blood pressure?
Really? Had no idea.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So your blood vessels, right, they're constantly under pressure from the blood flowing through them. And they also like stretch and contract to regulate that flow.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But what's really cool is that there are mechanoreceptors in the walls of your blood vessels that are like constantly monitoring that pressure and stretch.
So they're like little sensors.
Exactly. And when they sense a change, they send signals that help control things like blood vessel diameter and blood pressure.
Wow. So they're basically like helping to keep our blood pressure in check.
Yeah, pretty much. They're part of this whole feedback system that makes sure everything is running smoothly. Like, for example, in the aorta, that's the big artery that carries blood away from your heart, there are these special mechanoreceptors called baroreceptors.
Baroreceptors.
Yep. And they're super sensitive to changes in blood pressure. So when your blood pressure goes up, the baroreceptors sense that and they send a signal to your brain. And then your brain can like adjust your heart rate and stuff to bring your blood pressure back down.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's like we have this built-in pressure regulator.
I know, right? It's pretty slick.
So it's not just touch, hearing, and balance. It's also things like blood pressure regulation. What else are these mechanoreceptors involved in?
Well, there's also some evidence that they might play a role in like wound healing and inflammation.
Really? I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, it's still a kind of a new area of research,
What
but it
about?
seems like, when your body is injured, there are all these changes in the mechanical environment of the tissues.
Like things get swollen and stuff.
Exactly. And the mechanoreceptors, they sense those changes and they can trigger different signaling pathways that help with the healing process.
That's fascinating. It's like our bodies are so much more complex than we realize.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're learning new things about mechanoreceptors all the time.
I can imagine. So, okay, I have another question. You mentioned earlier that there might be a link between mechanoreceptors and cancer.
Oh, yeah. That's a really interesting area of research. So basically, as tumors grow, they can like stiffen the surrounding tissue,
Oh, okay.
and that creates this mechanical stress, which the mechanoreceptors can sense.
So it's like the tumor is creating this disturbance and the mechanoreceptors are picking up on it.
Exactly. And that can actually influence the behavior of nearby cells. Like, it can promote tumor growth and even spread.
Wait, seriously? That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. But it's also really important to understand how this works, because if we can figure out how mechanoreceptors are contributing to cancer development, we might be able to find new ways to prevent or treat it.
That's true. It's amazing how these tiny little sensors can have such a big impact on our health.
Right. It's mind-blowing.
Okay, so we've talked about hearing, balance, touch, blood pressure regulation, and even cancer. Is there anything else?
Well, there's one more thing I want to talk about. Remember proprioception?
Yeah, that's our sense of body awareness, right?
Exactly. It's how we know where our limbs are in space, even when we can't see them.
Yeah, like how I know that my hand is raised right now, even though my eyes are closed.
Exactly. And it's all thanks to proprioceptors, which are these specialized sensors located in our muscles, tendons, and joints.
So they're basically like giving our brain constant updates on where our body is and how it's moving.
Exactly. And it's really important for things like coordination and balance. Like, imagine trying to walk if you didn't know where your feet were.
Yeah, that would be a disaster.
So proprioception is pretty crucial for, just basic functioning.
Okay, that makes sense. So it sounds like mechanoreceptors are involved in a lot more than we might think.
Yeah, I think that's a good takeaway. They're not just about the five senses. They're involved in all sorts of things, from regulating our blood pressure to helping us heal from
It's
injuries.
like there's these little guardians working behind the scenes to keep our bodies running smoothly.
I like that. Little guardians. That's a good way to put it.
So I guess the big question is, what else don't we know about mechanoreceptors? You know, what else are they involved in that we haven't even discovered yet?
That's the exciting part, right? There's still so much to learn. And who knows what amazing things we'll discover about these tiny sensors in the future.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to start wrapping up this deep dive.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, it is pretty wild to think about all the things our bodies are doing without us even realizing it.
Right. Like all these complex systems just working away.
And it all comes down to, like, these tiny little sensors.
It really does. It's pretty remarkable.
You know, it makes me think about those cyclic AMP signaling microdomains we were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah, those little compartments.
Yeah, they're so tiny,
Yeah.
but they seem to play a big role in how cells respond to different signals.
Oh, they're crucial. It's like, imagine you have this big factory, right? And it's got all these different departments.
Okay, help follow.
So each department, it's responsible for making a specific product, but they might all be using like similar raw materials and tools,
Yeah.
But the final products are totally different because each department has its own special equipment and processes.
So you're saying those microdomains are like those specialized departments?
Exactly. Each one has its own little set of tools and processes for handling signals, and that's how you get different responses, even if the initial signal is the same.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like they're all working on the same basic stuff, but they're doing different things with it.
Exactly. And one of the things that helps to keep everything organized in these microdomains is scaffolding proteins.
Like those AKPs you mentioned before.
Yeah, those are the ones. They basically act like anchors, holding specific enzymes and signaling molecules in place within those microdomains.
So it's like they're creating these little signaling hubs.
Exactly. And that's important because it helps to make sure that the signals are transmitted efficiently and also that they're going to the right place.
I see. So it's all about keeping things organized and making sure that the right signals are going to the right targets.
Precisely. And that's how cells can respond to different stimuli in a specific and appropriate way.
That's pretty incredible. It's amazing how much complexity there is at the cellular level.
I know, right? That's mind-blowing.
But okay, what happens if those microdomains aren't working properly? You know, if something goes wrong with those AKPs or whatever.
Well, it can lead to all sorts of problems. I mean, there's research showing that disruptions in AKP signaling have been linked to things like heart failure, cancer, even neurodevelopmental disorders.
Wow, seriously.
Yeah, it's pretty serious stuff. And as we learn more about how these microdomains work and what can go wrong, we might be able to develop new treatments that target these specific signaling pathways.
That would be amazing. It seems like there's so much potential for new discoveries in this area.
Oh, absolutely. We've come a long way, but there's still so much more to learn.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up for today.
Yeah, I think so too.
We've covered a lot of ground. We talked about hair cells, touch receptors, those crazy signaling microdomains, and all the amazing things that mechanoreceptors are involved in.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say that we've all gained a new appreciation for these tiny sensors that are constantly working to keep us alive and functioning.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep marveling at the incredible world of sensory perception.
That's what we're here for.
From all of us here at The Deep Dive, goodbye.